Hi everybody. I thought I would send out a video talking through a couple of things that I think some of us may have missed on the last few assignments. I want us to be really comfortable with this idea of rhetorical analysis before moving into the final. Remember that your final is two-part. One is the post-test that you will do through Blackboard, and the other is the one that has to be proctored, and that's the essay where you will write a rhetorical analysis. And you won't have that prompt until, of course, you access the test. And remember that you need to make your appointment with ProctorU at least 72 hours in advance in order to avoid additional fees. So make sure you look into that as soon as possible. I wanted to point out to you also, as you are going into the final, I am going to expect you to be able to set up your Word document in our standard MLA format. And so remember that all of these folders are open for you so that you can access them again. And look at some things, brush up on some concepts, that kind of thing. Course Tools is open for you as well. Student Resources contains a lot of different information, one being standard format for instructions. And then in the Learning Guides for Success, there's a lot of stuff there. If you can't remember, your literary elements, for example, for that post test, then you can go in and look at this link or this song to help you to remember those devices, that kind of thing. So all of this kind of stuff is still open to you. If you're having trouble with comma rules, check this out, etc. Research guides, make sure that you do some brushing up. One of the things that I want you guys to get is that we do build upon our knowledge in this class. We don't just like take one unit, learn something, and then throw it in the trash, get rid of it, and go with something else. Instead, it's a constant building of knowledge. So back in the research module, there was some information on citing sources correctly, how to evaluate them, and I want to point out this argumentation notes because in it talked about some different types of order. Okay, so if you did not remember that that was there, make sure you go in and check that out. One of the things that some of you put on Stuff Is Not Salvation is that you thought that she kind of went chronologically through her ideas. And so I wanted to clarify, chronologically means time order. Okay, think about your knowledge of word parts and chrono. So it doesn't really go in time order like this thing happened first, this thing happened second, this thing happened third, or, this happened in 1960, this happened in 1980, this happened in 2000. That would be chronological order, but that's not really what's going on here. What's happening instead is she is putting this in an order of inductive reasoning. Some of you put down that her thesis statement was the question, why did I buy all this junk in the first place? However, that's not a thesis. Remember that a thesis is a bold statement. Now, she alludes to where she's going, but I want you guys to think about induction as being like you in the research process. It's where you first question and then you start pulling all of your evidence together and then you draw some conclusions. So your research process is inductive. All right, you ask questions and then you pull in evidence. And really that's what she's doing, is she's asking this question and it's leading her down this path of, well, there's this thing that happened and there's this thing that happened, and yeah, I'm a part of this. I'm the part of the audience that I'm criticizing here. I too buy stuff that I don't need and that kind of thing. So, which in fact really kind of gives her more credibility if you think about it, right? So that's ethos. So I get what you guys are saying, that, she mentions the Depression early on in this. Historical references, remember, those are ethos. But then she pulls in some logos, she has pathos, and it's all back and forth, right? And then she leads up to her real thesis, which some of you picked up on. I'm so proud of you. You noticed that Title significance. She really says what her whole main idea is in the title. On page 428 at the top, she says, here I go stating the obvious, stuff does not bring salvation. So she's leading up to her conclusion that she's drawn. So that's inductive reasoning. Now, you guys are really used to deductive reasoning because that's the way you've had to write probably in all of your writing classes. You go through the process of induction and finding your information and compiling your thoughts. But when you present your essay, you are using deduction because what you are doing is you are supplying that thesis where you've already drawn your conclusions at the very beginning, and then you go through a process of supplying the evidence for the reader and then reestablish your conclusion at the end. But I want you guys to remember induction and know what that is and the difference. And that, again, was back in that research module on argument. So again, we're building upon our knowledge, okay? So if we go into the rhetoric module, then you will see that I still have all of these different aids for rhetorical analysis. So go back and review those so that you're really solid. Even the videos on annotating the essay by Martin Luther King and that kind of thing. You know, I told you guys you cannot have notes with you when you do this essay. So you might think in terms of memorizing the steps in the acronym. That might help you to remember what you need to do, what you need to be looking for. It gives the kind of the guiding questions or critical questions, and then it gives you the idea of using soapstone, where you analyze the speaker and what is the occasion, and that really is referring to the context from our notes, the rhetoric notes that I put in there for you, and the audience. So think about who is the speaker, and does this speaker have credibility in talking about this subject? You know, Lewis Thomas, in talking about natural death, he was a doctor and a researcher, and so he had credibility in talking about that. So he establishes his ethos through his own persona, if you will. And then the occasion is the context. What prompted this writing? What caused it? And even if you don't know what was going on in 2008, that Anna Quindlen wrote this as a response to the kind of depression of our time, she talks about that in the essay. So it's important for you to pick up on the occasion. What is she writing in response to? What's happening in the environment? Like, for example, in Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham City Jail, he was writing that letter in response to a group of white clergymen who said, just don't worry about this civil rights thing, you know, just cool your heels a little bit, it'll happen, okay? And then Dr. Martin Luther King was like, okay, but waiting isn't the answer. We've got to do something. And so that's what that letter was in response to. So the occasion or the context is really important for us to think about. The audience, who is the intended audience? You know, yes, his letter was published in a newspaper, but his audience was also really responding to or talking to that group of clergymen who had already published something in the paper, okay? And Anna Quindlen, again, as I said, she's a member of the audience she's criticizing, and so it's important to note that, you know, is this person just kind of making fun of a group of people for spending too much? No, she's going, look, I'm guilty too, but here's the problem, okay? And do remember that according to those argument notes that I gave you, really, writing argument has so many different purposes. You know, she's not writing this to convince you. She's not trying to persuade you not to spend your money. It would have been written differently had that been her true aim. Okay, but instead she's writing arguments. She's advocating for this idea of us thinking more about what we need and what we really don't need, because it is having an effect on us as people and our economy. Okay, so think about that with purpose and subject, and then the tone of the piece. You know, is it tongue in cheek? Is it what's the style, if you will? So I wanted to clarify something on that. Several of us kind of missed this concept of what she was writing like, what her style was, and those critical questions. And so if you look back at those, these critical questions are designed to make you think about that soapstone, you know, acronym. And so when you talk about style, you know, if she's formal or she's casual, well, think about you know, is this conversational in nature? Several of you said it was almost like she was just kind of talking to you. And then think about, how do we get that? How do you think that if she's just talking to you? Well, she uses first person. She uses fragments. She says things like interest, period. Yippee, period. Okay. And that's tongue in cheek. She's using a little bit of humor there. She uses contractions. So she's really deviating from the expected convention of an essay, which we would expect would be formal in nature. This was published in Newsweek magazine. So it isn't formal though. She's being just very conversational and casual in a way. And understand that pedantic is like, I'm preaching at you. I'm trying to teach you a lesson. And it's almost a critical kind of word. Okay, didactic and pedantic, those are very similar in nature, but both of them kind of have a negative connotation. Okay, and then the other thing that I wanted to make sure that I addressed was the structure of pieces. You know, if we are talking about something that's chronologically or topically, notice the little dot, 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 etc. there. So that means that there are other ways you can structure a piece. And some of you hit the nail on the head. You said that it was sequential. That's really the best way to describe the way that the Crotalus writes her essay, A Passion for Justice. You know, she goes kind of sequentially through William's argument of the clan of one-breasted women, but she is, yes, she is analyzing and evaluating along the way. That's what rhetorical analysis is, guys, is you're looking at someone else's argument and asking yourself, is this successful or not? Why or why not? What is this person using in order to get this argument across to me? And am I a part of that intended audience or not? You know, if this was written in, you know, let's say, for example, if it was written in 1988, most of you weren't even born then. So you're not the original intended audience, but guess what? You're the audience now. So it's okay to analyze and say that for this original audience, this would have been very convincing. However, for today's reader, he or she would expect more cited sources for this to truly be convincing. But again, I mean, I think you have to ask yourself, is this one really written to be convincing? Is it persuasion or not? Now, I think that Williams is persuading, and of course, Anna Quinlan was not. So A Passion for Justice is sequential, but she kind of goes, if you would have said topical, I would have accepted that with an explanation. Some of you said chronological, and I accepted that just because you explained afterward what you meant, and I got it. But if you didn't explain, chronological is just wrong, because it doesn't go in time order, but instead divides up this argument. And she really kind of first starts with talking about logos. And she has a couple of paragraphs on 468, 469 that's really focused on the logos of William's argument. Then on 470, she goes into the ethos, where she starts talking about religion, etc. The bottom of that page, there's a whole paragraph on pathos. And then she does that again on 471 in a couple of paragraphs. And then she kind of brings it all together at the end. So I wanted you guys to think about the structure of this author's piece, because you can do that too. You can go by the appeals in organizing your essay. but that's not the only way to do it. You've got to think about, what is this author giving me? What do I have the most to say about? I hope this helps. I'm running out of time. So let me know if you have questions. Go to the Course Tools forum for that. Have a great week.